you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good morning. We had a little bit of a laugh this morning. Two of the kids that probably 3 years old that were going to daycare, they stopped in and asked if they could join the Grandpa's Club. He said, yeah, check in about 70 years from now. Our speaker today is Jeremy Shaffer. Jeremy and his wife and his family live in Ross Township, raising 5 kids, and in his spare time he runs a business and he's involved in politics. So without further ado, please welcome Jeremy Shaffer.
Make sure I turn this on. We good? Yep. Thank you so much for having me. As I said, my name's Jeremy Shaffer, blessed with 5 children, and I'm deeply concerned about the future of this country. And I've been blessed to live the American dream. I tell people all the time that I was born in the greatest country in the history of the world. And that allowed someone like me, who was born to teenage parents, really in very humble means, to be able to know that if I worked hard and took advantage of the opportunities that were out there and the freedoms that we have in this country, that I'd have a chance at success. And that's what I did. I'm a boomerang person, so my family has been in Western Pennsylvania for like 8 to 10 generations before the Revolutionary War, but my grandfather left Western Pennsylvania to get a job down in DC area after World War II, and so I grew up right by Quantico Marine Base down there. But when I was looking at schools, I ended up coming to Carnegie Mellon to go to graduate school, a little school in Pittsburgh. And the interesting fact, the first house that my wife and I bought ended up being 2 miles away from the church that my great-grandfather was a pastor of. So I've come full circle. But at Carnegie Mellon, I'm an engineer, a problem solver at heart, and so I got a PhD in electrical and computer engineering. And Carnegie Mellon is a very interdisciplinary place, so you work with people in all the different engineering fields. And I was working with people who were civil engineers, and we were focused on solving problems related to bridges. Have you ever seen any bridges around here? Pittsburgh's the city of bridges. So my friend and I started a company focused on bridge inspection and bridge management, so really bridge safety. First couple of years were a grind. We were doing it while we were students. It took us 5 years, and we got really our first customers. And then we were able to hire basically 40 employees, all based here in Pittsburgh, good American jobs. And through that process, I traveled all over the country, and I got to see governments that do well, that manage things well, and I also got to see governments that really don't manage things well. And I will make a point, because people always ask me, we were never able to do any work in the city of Pittsburgh. So our company, PennDOT's a tough nut to crack, and we never did crack PennDOT. But we ended up doing all the bridges in Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey. We basically surrounded the state of Pennsylvania. And so I saw a government that works well. I saw a government that often struggles. I was heads down, very focused on growing my business for several years. But then sold my company to a much larger Pennsylvania-based company. That gave me some free time. And we had moved out of the city, living in Ross Township. So McKnight Road, I'm sure everyone knows where Ross is. And Ross is a great community. We really got enmeshed there. When you have 5 kids, you're coaching youth sports teams, you're going to church, you're really getting to know everyone in the community. And there were things in Ross Township local government that I thought could be done a lot better. And so I'm the type of person that you can either sit back and you can complain about things and say, oh, I wish they did it that way, I wish someone did this, or you can try to step up and be part of the solution. So Ross doesn't have a mayor, it's a township, so we have 9 commissioners. So in 2013, I ran to be a Ross Township commissioner. And it was my first time running for public office. Knocked on every door twice. The whole family, I guess at the time I might have only had 3 or 4 kids, but even got the kids involved in it. And I laid out a plan and said, look, here are the problems that I see in Ross, and here are the solutions, and this is what we can do about it. And even though my area of Ross was, I think, 60% Democrat, 30% Republican, 10% independent, I didn't talk about party. My slogan was, let's make Ross better together. And I ended up winning with over 60% of the vote. And went on, after 2 years, on a board of 6 Democrats and 3 Republicans, they elected me president on a very bipartisan vote. So I got to serve as president of Ross Township for a term, and really delved into how can we make Ross a better place. We actually cut some of our taxes, led the redevelopment with the block at Northway, if you know the old Northland Mall that was decaying, worked with business and labor to really get things done in Ross, and with the residents of Ross to make it a better place. What I'm seeing right now in our country is we are really, basically, we're destroying ourselves from the inside out. Right now, Vladimir Putin in Russia and Xi in China, they don't have to do anything. They can just watch us from afar and watch our leaders basically bicker and fight and stumble around and not lead this country to the place where it needs to be. With my 5 children, with the fact that I've been able to live the American dream, I was at a point where it's like I can once again either sit back and complain about things and bemoan the direction of our country, or I can try to step up and be part of the solution. In this country, we have 435 United States congressmen. They're divided between the different states. After redistricting, reapportionment with the census, Pennsylvania has 17 congressmen. So we're divided into 17 congressional districts. All of you, if you live in northern or western Allegheny County, if you live in the Swickley area, Moon area, you live in District 17. That district is currently represented by Connor Lamb. Connor is not running again. He tried to run for United States Senate. He got crushed by John Fetterman in the Democratic primary. So this is an open seat. I am the Republican nominee here. But I'm running, I'm running to really put my country before my party. We need leaders from all over this country who will get together and do what's right to get us back on track. We have the river right behind me here, the Ohio River. Now we've got some small locks and dams, so some little waterfalls on the Ohio River, but imagine we have Niagara Falls instead. I often say that Republicans, Democrats, and independents, we are all in the boat together. We're all Americans. We're all on Team USA. And I think right now, if you're honest with yourselves, all of us can hear the fact that we hear a waterfall dead ahead. Things are not going right in this country. And unfortunately, our leaders have all too often sped the boat up further down the river, heading towards that waterfall. We need people who will go to Washington, D.C. and try to turn the boat around before we get to the waterfall, before we go over. This country right now is approaching $31 trillion in debt. $31 trillion in debt. That's a hard number to even fathom, right? When I was younger, maybe half my age, we were $1 trillion in debt. And that was of grave concern. $31 trillion in debt. That's both a moral issue and a national security issue. When we have that much debt, it robs the current and future generations of the opportunities that they will have, because so much of our resources just need to go pay it off. I'm an engineer, so forgive me when I fall back on math, but at a 5% interest rate on $31 trillion, that's over $1.5 trillion a year just to pay the interest on the national debt. That is double what we spend on the entire defense budget. If there was a debate about for student loan forgiveness, you could basically let every American go to college for free with the money that we spend on the interest on the national debt. Plus, that national debt is owned by people all over the world. Some of these countries like China are not our friends, and they can use that as leverage against us. I've had to balance my budget in my family. My wife and I balance it for our family. I had to balance it for my company. I had to balance it in Ross Township. In Ross Township, there were lots of things we wanted to do, but we had to get together as a board of commissioners. We had to say, what are our strategic long-term goals? What are the priorities that we want to accomplish? And okay, how can we begin to make the tough choices to spend the limited money we have to be able to achieve those goals and to be able to put ourselves on that foot? Unfortunately, right now, our federal government often goes between one partial budget to another partial budget. You hear these things called continuing resolutions, where right now we are 7 days away, I believe, till government spending authority expires. So over the next 7 days, you're going to hear a crash course of trying to get a new budget passed. And unfortunately, what's probably going to happen is it's going to be a partial budget that just kicks the can down the road for a month or 2 months. And then there's going to be another fight, and they're going to keep kicking the can down the road this time and time again. When that happens, we're all losers. We're all losers in this kicking the can down the road. Right now, when we're running these massive debts, we're pumping money into the economy, often not wise ways. It helps spur inflation. The inflation is running extremely hot right now. It's running over 9%. To put that in perspective, that's basically like someone takes 1 month of your entire salary. Think about that. Think about these families I talk to all the time that are struggling, making choices about where and how they're going to make ends meet. When inflation's running at 9%, that's over 1/12 of your income. You're losing a whole month and a little bit more of salary. People on fixed incomes, that is a very bad tax that's going on. It is so critical to get our financial house in order in this country to be able to provide the opportunities, provide the freedoms that we need as a country to move forward. I've talked with many families who are trying to make those decisions. It's very sad to hear when you talk to a family like, yeah, my kid can't do baseball this year because I don't have the money to pay for the registration and to buy him new cleats and stuff. This is a serious issue that we have. In this region, Western Pennsylvania, we literally have built America. Our mills and our factories and our natural resources have basically been the arsenal of freedom, whether it was back in the Civil War or even in World War II. And I want to acknowledge, I heard we have 2 World War II vets here. Thank you for your service, and thank all of the veterans here for your service. It's because of you that I had the freedoms, and that we all have the freedoms to be able to live in this country, and we need to protect those freedoms. I was over on Neville Island earlier, and fascinating story. This country can do amazing things when we put our mind to it and we work together. Neville Island, a person showed me a picture. It was sometime in a little bit before, it was a little bit late summer, early fall of 1941. It was like farm fields on Neville Island. And then, less than a year later, it was factories, and it was where they made the landing craft World War II landing craft, they would make all these landing craft and they would ship them down the Ohio River. And the Pittsburgh area can lead the way in coming together and showing how we can work together as Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and actually make things here in this country, drive our industry back here. Right now, I'm sure if any of you all drive a car, see gas prices are very high. When you heat your homes, unfortunately right now, what you're gonna be seeing is that natural gas prices are gonna be much, much higher this winter. Electricity prices have already gone up. Right beneath our feet in Western Pennsylvania, we sit on the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. We have more natural gas in the Marcellus Shale than they have in whole regions of the Middle East. We have the solution right here in Western Pennsylvania to a lot of the energy needs that we have in this country. If we can safely be able to extract those resources, process them, we can provide thousands of high-paying jobs again to Western Pennsylvanians, and we can bring industry back to our region. One example of that is Shell invested well over $1 billion in the cracker plant, which is right down the Ohio River in Beaver County. There were thousands of blue-collar tradespeople who helped build that. There'll be hundreds of people who will help operate it, high-quality jobs that will help support people, and that will have an amplifying effect to our region because other businesses will want to move right around there. I filmed a video when, I think you all remember when Joe Biden went over to Saudi Arabia? Anyone remember that? That was a month or so ago, and he met with the Crown Prince there, who actually everyone knows killed an American citizen through his directives, and I think he gave him a fist bump. And I went public. I said, look, Joe Biden can come here to Western Pennsylvania. I will show him around Western Pennsylvania. I'll give him a fist bump here. And if we can unleash our Pennsylvania energy resources, we can provide the economic spark for Western Pennsylvania to provide high-quality jobs and bring industry back to this region. During the COVID crisis, many of us became aware of how dangerous our supply chains had become. So much of the critical goods that we rely on are produced in places like China. I believe I read somewhere that, I want to say like 90% of certain types of our medicine are made in China. So much of some of the things we're finding out that's even in our own weapon systems for the military are being made in China. This is not how we should be running a country. We need policies that bring jobs back to the United States that are pro-American, pro-worker policies. I will fight for this region. I'll fight for you. I've been traveling all over Beaver County and Allegheny County talking to people, listening to those areas that people have concern about. The reality is I will be one of 435 members of the United States House. So, our government, you have an executive branch led by the president, you have the legislative branch, which is the U.S. Senate and the United States House, and then you have the judicial branch. So, if I'm fortunate enough to be elected here in this area, I will be your representative to the legislative branch, the United States House of Representatives in D.C. It might be my job to represent you and the 765,000 people that are in this district here. To do that, it's absolutely going to be something I'm going to have to work with both parties to achieve. I will use my expertise. I've served over 20 years in the transportation industry with my company on various transportation boards. So I would certainly hope to be on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, work on issues that are critical to our region, like our roads, our airport, the locks and dams that a lot of the trade and commerce come up. People don't realize that just right behind me or right down the road on the Ohio River, the amount of material that flows up and down those rivers and how critical it is for our region. I also, our region is blessed with some great universities, some great hospital systems, and they've helped be part of the renaissance to revive our Pittsburgh region. So I also want to be on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee and help drive some of the thoughts of how we can make and keep America competitive. We are competing in a global economy. the Chinese, Japanese, the Indians, all these countries, they see us as the leader in the world, and they're nipping at our heels, and they're doing all they can to try to be able to displace us. And we need to wake up, and we need to look at our strengths as a region, as a country, be able to invest in those, and be able to help create the companies, the jobs, the technologies we need to stay a step ahead of where we're going. So, this is a critical election. Right now, you basically have two visions of where the country can go. You have a vision that says we need more government, higher taxes, and the solution to our problems is to spend trillions of more dollars on that. And then you have a solution that says, actually we need efficient government. We need to protect our freedoms. We need to prioritize where that investment's going. And sometimes the answer is that less government, less regulation actually can help families thrive and businesses thrive. Obviously, I'm in the camp of smaller government, more freedom. I believe that that will empower parents and empower individuals, empower families, empower companies to make the right decisions so that they will be able to pursue happiness and the life that they want and provide for their families. I am very concerned that the direction of bigger and bigger government will simply erode our freedoms and give us less options and take us down the path that won't be good. Margaret Thatcher often said, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. And all of these things, everything being free, it sounds good, but you know what? You have to pay for it at some time. Nothing's free. And someone's gonna have to pay for it, and eventually there won't be any money left. And if I've often said to some of my opponents, I will buy you a plane ticket to go visit Venezuela, and you can go see, Venezuela used to be the richest country in South America, had a thriving middle class, and then it got taken over by a socialist dictator. And right now it's one of the poorest countries. And you're seeing hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing Venezuela based on what has happened there. And we need to fight for the freedoms that we have in this country. Western Pennsylvania has led the way in so many different periods of time in this nation's history. And I believe that we can lead the way in electing representatives from our region that can make a difference in Harrisburg and can make a difference in Washington, D.C. So this is a critical election. The United States House, I believe it's currently a the Democratic Party has a 4 or 5 seat majority over the Republican Party. And the Democrats are in control of the White House and control the Senate. And if, depending on what happens in this election, you will see a trend to either much more government spending and higher taxes, or you'll begin to see a trend towards trying to rein in some of the government spending, trying to begin to balance the budgets that are there. So I do want this to be as interactive as possible. I'm an engineer, not a lawyer, so I'm happy to take some questions. Yeah.
Okay, let's use the mic, and we'll get everybody covered.
You could list the problems in this country, or there's probably a dozen, the real serious problems. Two that I see are the massive debt, 31 trillion. That's 31 followed by 16 zeros, or maybe another way would be 31 million times 1,000. It's a lot of money. Another problem we have is the problem of divisiveness, which is terrible. Both sides are responsible for that. But I think another thing that should be identified is the lack of education. And by education, I don't mean college. People should realize what's going on here, how much danger this country is in. And if we could educate the people that don't want to listen to the problem of not trying to ameliorate each other's problems, get together, put heads together and compromise. No, but everybody in the political parties just don't want to do that. But that's something that I think has to be done founded by education. Let people know what's going on.
Yeah, so when I was a township commissioner, my philosophy in general, being a business owner, you have to be practical and pragmatic. Oftentimes I come into a meeting and maybe, okay, here's the problem, my ideas are A, B, C, and D. And then someone else comes in from the other side and they say, yeah, that's a problem, my ideas are C, D, E, and F. And in DC right now, what immediately happens is the one side goes to, well, if we can't get A done, then we're doing nothing. And the other side goes to, if we can't get F done, we're doing nothing. My philosophy is, well, we agree on C and D. Let's get C and D done and at least get half of the way there. And that's a win for everyone. And then maybe when we build trust and relationship, we can kind of get a little bit more done after that. But right now, things are so polarized. I mean, look, the country's like divided half and half. Well, I got a message for you. Half the country is not just going to simply leave. You know, we're in the boat together, and so we're going to have to figure out how to work together. And I do think having civics education and people maybe trying to educate themselves more than a 100-character tweet on their phone is something that we need more of too. Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah.
You mentioned bridges.
Yeah.
You mentioned bridges. Could you explain how Fern Hollow Bridge collapsed and why nothing was done about it in time to save a potential catastrophic problem?
The Fern Hollow Bridge is a case study in how government can fail the people that it's supposed to represent. Fern Hollow Bridge is owned by the city of Pittsburgh. It's a very simple bridge structure. I mean, you have some very complex bridges. Fern Hollow Bridge, you have a deck and you have 4 supports, okay? They're all visible. You don't get much simpler bridges than that, okay? The city of Pittsburgh, instead of the city of Pittsburgh, if you're a local government, you should prioritize, keeping your residents safe, so with a police force and other emergency first responders, and you should prioritize your infrastructure. Instead, the city of Pittsburgh, they were looking at trying to do a universal basic income program. They were looking at all these different woke programs to try to spend money on, instead of spending the money they needed to take care of their infrastructure. And so what did they do? That bridge, they knew the problems. You could see them. The people walking in Frick Park underneath the bridge could see the problems there. And what they did is they kept kicking the can down the road. Instead of spending, it's just like, let me give you an example. If your roof is leaking on your house, and it could cost you maybe $100 to get the shingles fixed, to patch, to keep that leak from stopping. What the city of Pittsburgh did was the roof is leaking, still leaking, and then the water came down, the ceiling got saturated, the ceiling fell in, the roof got worse, and then eventually the whole house got destroyed. And now the taxpayers are spending tens of millions of dollars to fix a bridge. That bridge should have still been in good condition if they had spent money on preventative maintenance, and they didn't do it. That was a complete failure of the city of Pittsburgh not taking care of their infrastructure.
Given your background and everything, the Congress passed a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill.
Yep.
And would you have supported that or not, and why?
So, simple answer is yes. We need to invest in infrastructure in this country. Our roads and bridges, our ports, our dams. Are there things in that infrastructure bill that I did not like? Yes. I would have wanted to change some of the stuff that I didn't feel like was really proper infrastructure that was in there. I would have been one of the few Republicans who voted for it. My experience in government, you can always find a reason to vote no on something. If you want to, let's be honest, you can always find a reason to vote no. At some point, you also have to find a reason to vote yes. And so the infrastructure bill is probably a bill that I liked 70% of what was in there, and I disliked 30% of what was in there. If I had been in part of the process, I would have tried to change the 30% I wouldn't like. Maybe, but in the end of the game, you're gonna have to make a decision, tough decisions, on are you gonna be, in that case, I would have weighed the scales and be like, I don't like that, but I do like this, and I would have taken a tough vote on it, yes.
Isn't some of the reasons for the infrastructure problems is all the regulations? You know, we are regulating ourselves to death. When it takes to put a mile highway in, and you got almost 6 to 7 years just to try to get through all the bureaucracy to let them build that, you know, 1.5 miles or 2 miles of roadway. That's where a lot of this BS is coming from.
The regulations are out of control on so many levels. I was talking to a small business in Robinson. They have 12, 13 employees. He's telling me, he's like, it's so hard. It's easy to either work for the government or work for a big business. He's like, at one of these multinational corporations, they have people who deal with the regulations. I've got 12 people here. Like, how am I supposed to know what the regulation is for the fire extinguishers, for that the exit doors need to have a certain, width? And he was like showing me all of these regulations that for a small business to comply with is insane. Now, to build infrastructure, to your point, we used to be able to build these big interstates and massive infrastructure projects and get them done relatively quickly. Now, the process to build something takes forever, and then it discourages being able to do the things that we know we need to do.
We never have the interstate.
Yeah, we wouldn't. If we had the regulations we do today, we would not have the interstate highway system. That is correct. Yeah, and I will say, look, I'm 45 years old. Okay, there are people serving in Congress who have been there for longer than I've been alive. So I'm also a big believer in term limits, because one of the things is when you have people who have been in Congress that long, they lose touch of these common issues. And when you had, our Congress was designed, especially the House, was designed to be citizen representatives who came here, talked with people, said, what are the issues? Then they went and voted on it. Then they came back and they went and voted on it. And they were like still farmers or lawyers or shopkeepers. It wasn't a professional job that they used to enrich their families and their friends. We need to get back to a system where the representatives actually serve the people and not the other way around. And so I often say, look, Congress is broken. The institution of government is broken. As an engineer, I look at that and say, we need to fix the system. What's one of the ways we fix the system? Term limits. That's a very, massive majorities of Republicans, Democrats, Independents believe in term limits. It's a way to kind of flush the system out, get new people in. Yes, you do lose some people you might like, but you know what? I'm confident that let's say I win and after 4 terms, I'm term limited out, that's fine. I believe that in 765,000 people, there's someone else who's got some good ideas who can take my place. And so we got to fix the system, but we still have to operate for the time being within a broken system too. Yeah.
I have a question to help me understand when a bill is looked at, all the representatives, whether it's in the Senate or the House, you have a bill that comes at 400 pages, 500 pages, 800 pages, 1,000 pages. How in the heck do you guys understand what the hell you're voting on?
The system, let me say again, the system is broken. What will happen with this, we're in a period of time right now where the exact situation I think you're describing is about to happen. Government funding is set to expire on September 30th. And as we get closer to that date, we could hear more and more noise about it. What will likely happen is on September 28th, September 29th, it could be like a 5,000-page bill. It's dropped that hardly anyone has read, and that they are asking the representatives to vote on in a few hours. That's the way our government is basically working right now. And it is not supposed to be that way. We need to get back to what's called regular order, and we need to be able to have the committee systems function, to have the committees review the bills, to have have time for the representatives to read these bills, to understand what's in there, and also, instead of having these big omnibus packages, having very specific bills that are understandable, so that instead of being a 5,000-page bill, maybe it's a 50-page bill that you can read and understand and vote up or down, and then go to the next 50-page bill, and the next 50-page bill, and the next 50-page bill. So yeah, I agree with your sentiment totally.
Do you think the 2020 presidential election was stolen?
No, I don't. Look, 2020 was a unique time period. It was during the pandemic. We had a lot of things were done in the election in 2020 that weren't normally done. In North Park, South Park, a lot of our parks, there were these remote polling stations set up. There were drop boxes in different places. It was probably a learning experience for everyone in the political system. Were mistakes made? I believe they were. But look, I'm looking forward to 2022, which the election is in 45 days. We'll be working hard to make sure that that's run in the correct way with all parties involved. I will say this, look, the only way a democracy works is when everyone has faith in the democracy, that their vote counts, and that the democracy is working the right way. So in any democracy, if you have a substantial portion of the electorate that doesn't believe that the system functions correctly or that their vote counts, you need to get that corrected somehow to restore trust in the system. Because it's fundamental that in a democracy that all parties have trust. And I do believe it's the job of leaders in all parties to help work together to restore trust in a democracy, because if we don't have trust in a democracy, that takes us to a very dark place. Yeah.
One of the favorite hit commercials I see all the time is all the thousands and millions of jobs you managed to ship to China. I have no idea how a 40-person company could do that, but
I don't, like, maybe you can tell me. So let me answer that. I literally, as a Carnegie Mellon student, my friend and I started a company based in Pittsburgh, stayed here in Pittsburgh, created 40 jobs, all here in Pittsburgh. And I'm not even sure I know how to spell China as an engineer. But anyways, this is why people hate political advertising. Okay, so I mentioned that I sold my company, right? So we were, and let me point out, when we were growing our company, Pennsylvania is not the easiest place to do business in. You know, there were other opportunities for us to leave Pennsylvania, and we chose to stay in Pennsylvania, okay? Western PA is one of the best places to raise your family in, best places to live in. I want to stay here and make it a better place, not leave to go somewhere else where you move to Florida and there's no income tax, or Pennsylvania is the highest corporate income tax in the country. Yeah, I agree. I like Western PA. So why are they lying about that? Because they can. You're legally allowed to lie in political ads. It's crazy. But what they're trying to say, if you read the words carefully, is that I sold my company to a larger Pennsylvania-based company, and oh, guess what? That 5,000-person Pennsylvania-based company has like 80 people in China. And so therefore, they're somehow saying that I outsource jobs to China. And when I sold my company, I have no decision-making power in the 5,000. It would be like if you worked at PPG or US Steel or UPMC or any large company that had one employee in China, they could run the same exact ad against you. And I hope that people are smart enough to see that. And like someone told me, if that's the worst they can come up with against you, then you know you're pretty good. So, yes.
With a degree in electrical engineering, can you discuss what's going on with electric vehicles and what's your position on them, and do you think they will be functional?
Yeah, so great topic. Our electricity grid, let me try to make this the short answer, not the long. I could give you an hour-long answer on this one. But, well, I'll give you the briefer answer. So our electricity grid is undergoing a transformation. It is, in the past, our electrical grid has been based on stable, reliable power that's being produced by nuclear, coal, natural gas, and other constant energy sources to meet a demand. We have made a decision as a country to try to reduce our carbon dioxide and other emissions that are going on. What you're seeing, and also natural market effects, is that a lot of the coal-fired power plants like Bruce Mansfield are being shut down because of that. And some of those are being replaced by solar and wind. The reality is when you take 1 megawatt of stable power off the grid, you basically need to replace it with 7 to 9 megawatts of renewable energy. Because sometimes the sun doesn't shine, sometimes the wind isn't blowing. So you have a capacity and a delivery problem. You see that in California right now, where certain times of the day when the sun is going down, you have a time of the day when the solar energy is going down, but it's the hottest time of the day in the late afternoon, so electricity usage is peaking. And you get into these situations in a certain hour of the day when you can have rolling blackouts because of that. So getting to the electric vehicles obviously pull power off the grid. Any vehicle to travel needs power, whether it's gasoline or natural gas or electricity. Electric vehicles is a great idea as long as we can produce the energy and the batteries. One of the concerns is it's actually pretty environmentally destructive to get all the material for the battery in electric vehicles. So we need to find a way around that. But electric vehicles in certain situations can be a positive thing. But you shouldn't, I also believe that I'm a big believer in the free market. So if you want to buy an electric vehicle, great. If you want to buy a gas-powered vehicle, go for it. But I'm very much opposed to like what's going on in California, where they're basically mandating that by 2035, you have to buy an electric vehicle. That's not right. Yeah.
But that will violate probably, if you're in Congress, and I'm sure you'll know the Constitution, violate the Interstate Commerce Clause, and probably that 2035, unless the Supreme Court goes crazy, will be ruled illegal.
I will be happy to talk about the detailed electrical things, and I'll let the smart lawyers talk about the legalities. But I think you're probably right that there will be some serious constitutional questions about whether or not gas-powered vehicles can be outlawed or not. Yeah.
Jeremy, I'd like to revisit term limits for just a second, because I talked to a person who's involved in Pennsylvania politics. That very topic came up. This person said, at first I was very much for term limits, and I think this person is still for that. However, they also mentioned that there is a permanent, we'll call it permanent bureaucratic class that employed by the state and federal governments that are there always. The implication was that this permanent bureaucracy underneath the elected official has an awful lot of power and influence because they're almost all unionized. Do you have any sense of how that's, because this person was saying that, okay, we'll do term limits, but that may not really solve the problem.
So I could take a minute. So a lot of people like to talk about specific issues within, like that they want done, which is completely legitimate. And I'm glad you're asking about term limits because I argue that the system is broken. And the bureaucracy is broken, the representative system is broken. Things like the districts we run in, gerrymandering has gotten out of control. That's broken too. And so you don't end up with a representative democracy in many ways. Term limits are part of the solution, but we also need to definitely reform the bureaucracy and hold it accountable. Right now, whether or not you are in favor of or against a vaccine mandate. I don't want to get into the politics of vaccine mandate. Do you realize that during the pandemic, those requirements for things like the vaccine mandate, they were not going to be done by a vote in Congress. They were going to be done through the bureaucratic state. It was going to be, one of them was going to be done through a government agency called OSHA, you've probably heard of, basically through the federal rulemaking process. A bureaucrat, an unelected bureaucrat, was going to effectively be able to mandate that hundreds of millions of Americans were going to have a vaccine. I would submit to you, whatever side of that argument you're on, that the founders of the United States Constitution never intended an unelected bureaucrat to be able to have that much power. So that needs to be reformed. The other thing I would also say, well, getting back to the system being broken, look, there are 435 congressional districts in this country. Probably 80 to 90% of congressional districts in this country are, the only thing you need to worry about is whether or not you win your party's primary. So think about that. There is no incentive, no political incentive. There's actually a reverse political incentive not to compromise for 80 to 90% of our elected representatives, because the only concern that they have is the primary in the spring. They'll know that whatever happens. So, I mean, you can go to entire states, Louisiana, Maryland, West Virginia, Arkansas, I mean, I could rattle off even more, Tennessee. Every single congressional district in those states is dominated by one party. There's not a single competitive congressional district in numerous states. That is not good for no matter what side you're on. And if you're in a Republican state, the Republicans do it for their favor. If you're in a Democrat state, the Democrats do it for their favor. So I mean, both parties are to blame here. And they're both kind of just, with computer systems and analysis, it's getting worse and worse and worse. This district that we live in, PA 17, you are one of less than 5% of Americans. Let that sink in. You are less than one of 5% of Americans who lives in the 20 out of 435 congressional districts that are rated a pure toss-up. So it is less than 5% of Americans, including the people in PA 17, Beaver and half of Allegheny County, that will literally decide who controls the U.S. House. Because all the other districts, barring some, crazy thing happening, by vote, they're already almost predetermined who's going to win. So that's why it's so important for people, especially in this district, to get out and educate themselves and make the right decision in November.
One of the things I find very frustrating is this Bitcoin. Congress wants to regulate it, yet they don't look at anybody that's in the market of Bitcoin or how it works or how it functions, yet you got these people sitting behind that desk there saying, we're going to come up with a regulation. It's like you're going to regulate how the air, you don't even know how the air works, but you're going to regulate it, And that is frustrating. Why aren't they bringing in people that are in the field of whether it's energy or, instead of some woman, she doesn't even know how the energy, how many kilowatts are generated, and she's the head of the energy source. She says, I'll have to get back to you. That's crazy.
Well, unfortunately, I think sometimes the less you know about something, the more likely you are to speak about it in Congress. So, look, there I think are 8 engineers in the entire Senate plus House. There's, I think, around 200 lawyers. So I'm sorry if any of you are lawyers, but so maybe I think differently than most of the people down there as an engineer. But yeah, I mean, I'm the type of person that if I'm making a vote on something, I don't understand it, I'm going to want to bring the experts. If there's a vote, look, I'm not a farmer. If there was a vote on a farm bill that comes in, I would certainly want to hear from the experts on related to farming, because I'll be the first to admit I don't understand farming. So yeah, I mean, we need experts in there, and you shouldn't just make laws off the cuff.
The thing is, lawyers react. They don't institute a challenge or anything. A lawyer is to react. You give me the evidence, and I'll react to it.
Yeah.
So that's what we're getting. They're reacting to things and not coming up with solutions.
I read that Biden signed an executive order back in March that, among other things, kind of takes control of our finances, our money. They know everything about our banking account, or they will, and they'll be able to keep you from spending money, or they'll know every transaction you make. Is there any truth to that? Or?
Yeah, 81,000 of them.
Well, I believe I know what you're referring to. So there are federal agencies that fall under Biden's purview that dictate when different financial transactions need to be reported to the federal government. One of the rulemaking, and I may get some of the details wrong because if I don't remember, one of the rulemaking was going to dramatically lower the threshold for financial transactions that need to be reported to the federal government. So it was going to go from some couple $1,000 or $10,000 mark down to like $400 or somewhere down there. So that basically any transaction over that would be reviewable by the federal government. That caused a lot of consternation. Small businesses would, a lot of like someone buying a riding lawnmower now, you know, it's like, oh man, you know, these small businesses would get, it becomes a burden on so many people to have to report all this information now to the federal government. And it was a big government overreach. I don't know what the end result, I know there was a big outcry over that, and I don't know if that's been implemented yet or has been delayed.
But you can't sell your tickets on Ticketmaster for the Steelers without having to do tax information now, so the government knows how much you made on those tickets.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as an aside, this gentleman sitting next to me and myself, we worked for
PNC on what's called suspicious activity reports, and we know a lot about them.
There you go.
So I will just say this, that, for instance, in Western Pennsylvania, there were fast food franchises that were exempt because the Treasury Department was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
In Youngstown, fast food franchises were not exempt. You can sort of figure out why they were not exempt.
I won't say anything bad about any other region.
Okay, any other questions for Jeremy? Okay.
If gas cars have paid for the highway system up to this time, how are electric cars going to pay for the highway system in the future?
That's a great question. So what you're referring to is a highway trust fund, which is funded by fuel taxes on gasoline. What's already happened over the past decade is that there's already been a deficit between what we spend on roads and what money is being generated by the gas taxes. What's happening is that vehicles are becoming more gas efficient, more electric vehicles, which are not paying for the roads. So what is going on is basically that revenue gap is being made up by general fund taxes. So your income taxes, other federal taxes, corporate taxes have been, as gas funding is going down, but the amount of roadway and infrastructure funding being paid for by general revenue funds is going up. It will be a policy decision if that continues or not, but the reality is that the traditional way of financing roads and bridges is not going to be able to be sustained because, just as a matter of fact, I mean, the gas tax revenues are going down and the needs are going up. And so we're going to have to find a way either through general funds or some other means to do that.
Okay, here, Dan.
Jeremy, if we are less government people and we would be considered a conservative and we liked everything we heard from you, what, sir, do you need from us to get you elected?
Thank you. What a friendly question. Well, look, number one, I need your vote and the vote of those people. I mean, this, no matter how much negative money they spend against me, ultimately it just comes down to who gets one more vote than someone else, right? So if you like what I'm saying, I would beg you to go vote November 8th or by mail-in ballot. If you really like what I'm saying and want to help, get a yard sign. We'll have some yard signs maybe out in the parking lot afterwards if people want them. And volunteer on the campaign. We have a work day this Saturday at our office over in McCandless where we're stuffing envelopes. You can go to my website, jeremyshaffer.com, or just see myself or Devin, my deputy campaign manager, afterwards. We'll get you on our email list, and you can learn about events. You can choose to go or not. And then finally, campaigns are expensive. When they run negative ads against me, if I don't have the money, I can't respond. So if you want to donate to my campaign, you can also do that. Yeah.
Okay. Tote? Okay, the learning process has occurred today. I think we've heard a lot of great comments, and I think we're all better for it. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Hey, Jerry, you mentioned about the other guy who was asked.
Oh, yeah. We did invite your opponent, and he never responded, so that's why we're not having him on, but hopefully he will respond now. But with that, I guess we're done.
Yeah, we're done.
Okay.
Okay, Jeremy, thank you. Great presentation, and we're all better for it.